Thank you all. So we have another wonderful panel in store for you. I want to say something about our presenting host, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA, really more than any other agency, has an awfully large responsibility, and they do it with an awfully small budget and very small staff. It's really astounding, the breadth of responsibilities that this one agency has. And again, I want to show the video that highlights the work that NOAA does on both sides of the firmament. When you look at the horizon and you see the sky and you see the water, know that NOAA has responsibilities on both sides. And NOAA really is, more than any other agency in the federal family, an agency in which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so the agency really is important for what it does. If we could have the video, please. So NOAA's catchphrase, service, science, and stewardship. Those three elements come together in no other office within NOAA more than it does with the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. It's sanctuaries that really represent all that the agency does, and they do it because, of course, they're place-based. And so rather than looking at any one sector, rather than looking at any one issue, it's in these special places, these 13 sites with the one monument, where all of NOAA comes together and can shine its work. Weather, fisheries, satellites, research, stewardship, sanctuaries really does have it all. So the announcement yesterday by John Podesta that they're going to begin to look at new national marine sanctuaries across the country is not just good news for the sanctuary program, it's good news for NOAA as a whole, because as sanctuaries grows, so does the agency. And as we heard, it's also a wonderful thing for the nation. The thing about the rule that was announced yesterday is that it really is one of the more creative rulemakings you will ever find. It turns the process that we had in the past entirely upside down. It doesn't only reopen a process that had been closed for 2 decades, but it flips it on its head, because before it was a top-down, government-led process to designate new sanctuaries. The rulemaking that was unveiled yesterday is a bottom-up process, where it's local communities and local managers and local decision makers who really are the ones who best know and can best appreciate these places and the resources that are within these places. And they now become the drivers of the process, putting into NOAA the request to designate new sanctuaries. And so going from top down to bottom up, from government-led to community-led to place-based, it really is an exciting opening for a new era in ocean conservation. And so with that, I'd like to introduce another video that talks a little bit about the nominations process.
This is Edward James Olmos. For the first time in years, the doors open to establish new national marine sanctuaries. I challenge everyone who cares about our nation's ocean and coasts to make your voice heard. This isn't just about the environment. It's about taking a stand for the special places you hold dear. This is your chance to let America know, to let the world know, that this place matters to me. We have an opportunity to make a difference, and it's up to all of us to take responsibility for ourselves and for future generations.
So with that, it's now time to turn to the congressional leaders in the House of Representatives who co-chair the National Marine Sanctuary Caucus. And just as diverse and broad and as different as our national marine sanctuaries are across the country, I don't think you could have any two people who represent that diversity better than Congressman Benishek and Congresswoman Capps. From freshwater to the ocean, the northern U.S. to the southern U.S., from a heavily populated, densely populated coastline to a rural, small town in USA heartland, a doctor, a nurse and a teacher, male and female, Democrat and Republican. We have two co-chairs who really define diversity and define the bipartisanship that is necessary and that is really endemic for our national marine sanctuaries. And so I want to invite Congressman Benishek up to the podium first, and then we'll have Congresswoman Lois Capps next. Congressman.
It's kind of you to have me here this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet many of you and participate in this event. I know it's Capital Ocean Week, but I don't live on the ocean. I live in Michigan. But my district has more coastline than any other district in the country, other than the state of Alaska, which is one district. And my water is fresh water, so I think we're pretty special where I come from. No sharks, but there's a lot of great wildlife there. I want to thank the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation for putting together so many great events this week. And I'd like to thank Jason, the CEO, for the kind introduction and all his hard work. And I'd like to thank our panelists, William Doros, Lynn Hale, and Dan Lafferty, for taking the time out of their schedules to be with us here today. Finally, I'd like to extend my thanks to all of you for your involvement with our oceans and preserving the great places that we have around the country. And my colleague, Congresswoman Capps, for her work with me as the co-chair of the National Marine Caucus. This morning, our esteemed panelists will talk about how communities shape special places. And I believe I'm from one of those most special places in America, northern Michigan. If you've ever read Hemingway's The Big Two-Hearted River, then you have a pretty good idea of the place. The trees are tall, the water is clear, the fishes are big, the winter air is cold. It's a beautiful remote wilderness where I live. And we're blessed to be bordered on all sides, frankly, from where I live by the Great Lakes. My constituents, friends, and family members are dedicated to preserving these special places that provide that pure Michigan experience that so many people around the world treasure Michigan for. A few weeks ago, I was honored to dedicate the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Wilderness Area in my district, which was the first wilderness area that was designated in over 5 years as a bipartisan issue. Actually, it was Carl Levin from my state got it through the Senate, and I got it through the House. That's the Democrat Senate and the Republican House. So that's pretty amazing how that worked. But and really, the reason that it worked was the fact that there was so much local input to the decision-making process. The developing our resources need to have the involvement of the local community. And that's how I was able to get it through the House, because people in the House, they don't like people in Washington telling them how to do things in California or in Michigan. So with the ample involvement of the local community, we were able to develop a plan that all stakeholders had an interest in, and I was able to convince the people in the House that that was the case. And I think it really should be a model for all wilderness going forward. So my district is also the home of a few other great places. We have the Pictured Rock National Lakeshore, another beautiful area of shoreline in this country. The Isle Royale National Park in the center of Lake Superior. And of course, the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. All these places have been set aside so that current and future generations can enjoy the natural habitat of these areas, as well as take time to learn about the historic significance of the areas in their local communities. Our communities have a deep respect for their maritime history, which is reflected in the places that we've chosen to preserve and protect. Our regional economy is bolstered by millions of people who come from around the world to enjoy the pure Michigan experience. I hope that many of you will have the opportunity to come up and visit my district as well, because it truly is the most beautiful place in America. With that, I'll hand off the microphone to my co-chair, Congresswoman Capps. Thank you for all you do. If I can be of any help, please call upon me. Thank you.
Well, Jason, thank you for bringing us all together, and I'm honored to be here with you to celebrate Oceans Week. And as Dr. Benishek was commenting and giving his remarks, I realized, even though there are vast differences, how much we have in common as well. I represent the Channel Islands Marine Sanctuary. Yay! Now we will hopefully see some new sanctuaries be added to the list. But I also represent a national forest. And I've introduced legislation. I'll use Dr. Benishek as a model to create wilderness, a California wilderness legislation to create within special places wilderness designation that will even add to the protections. And, you know, it is an honor to represent an area with such natural resources as I feel the responsibility, but also the honor. And that's why I'm so pleased that we have Capitol Hill Oceans Week, that we have the National Marine Sanctuaries Foundation. I remember when Eliana Ross-Layton and I were the original co-chairs of the caucus. And she's still a presence with us, but it needs to be diverse. I'm pleased that on the panel today is our West Coast chair of the Bill Duros of the Sanctuary Program. And I'm also want to highlight Lynn Hale because you represent Nature Conservancy on the panel, and we have in my district Morro Bay fisheries with a model unique program called Catch Shares that is, I hope it might come up some in the discussion, or at least if anyone has questions about a fabulous very, very carefully designed relationship between the fishermen and women and the Nature Conservancy. You know, events like this one that we're having, CHOW, remind us how valuable our marine environment is to our nation, to our planet. And I'm always very heartened to see so many passionate, resourceful people like you taking the time to be in Washington, D.C., to learn about new research, to discuss critical policy issues, to impact us all on the importance of what you represent and bring to the table. This panel is really a cool title, Communities Shaping Special Places. Our country is blessed with spectacular underwater treasures, and we're fortunate that so many places are recognized for their national significance through the National Marine Sanctuary Program. As co-chair of the Bipartisan Marine Sanctuary Caucus with Dr. Benishek, I've been so fortunate to learn about each sanctuary's unique contribution to our national network. In my district, of course, as I mentioned, Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary is a water wonderland. Towering kelp forests, rare blue whales, sea caves big enough to drive ships into. All sanctuaries have distinctive and immense natural beauty, but they also are valuable resources for research, for for education, and for livelihoods. For example, the Channel Island Sanctuary offers numerous economic opportunities for over 17 million people in Southern California. A single year of commercial fishing within the sanctuary, provides roughly $88 million in economic benefits and 2,000 jobs to 7 counties. This is just our region. So we depend on our special places for both tangible and intangible riches. And like all of you, I'm thrilled to learn now that NOAA is moving forward with the process to nominate new sanctuaries. I believe this effort is going to inspire more communities to invest and in protecting the natural and cultural resources they have. I'm also very proud of the inclusive way that sanctuaries are managed. Of the many ocean laws, the sanctuary approach to policy, I believe, truly is unique. Sanctuaries support multiple uses, and decisions are guided by a collaborative, stakeholder-driven process. The fishermen will tell you that, the fisherwomen too. This ensures that local communities can play and do play an active role in management. I've been fortunate to see the extraordinary significance of a sanctuary in my backyard, and I hope now that many other communities, new communities, will be able to as well. So this is a wonderful time to have a panel to allow you to further explore the power of places to inspire stewardship of our precious ocean resources. So enjoy CHOW, all of you. I certainly am, and my team, and keep up your wonderful, important work. Thank you. Thanks, Jason.
So before I invite the next panel up to take their seats, I want to comment on one reference that Dr. Benishek made. And some of you who have heard me before, who are obligated to listen to me, will have heard me say this already. But the reference to Ernest Hemingway writing about natural resources, Dr. Benishek quoted, talked about the big two-hearted river. Well, if you think about Hemingway, you think about where he was based. He did most of his writing in the Keys, of course. And then when you think about some of the other great American authors that really define what American literature is, you think of Herman Melville and his writing up in New England. You think of John Steinbeck and his place of home, Monterey, and one of his best books, Cannery Row. You think of James Michener, Hawaii, South Pacific. It's no coincidence that the greatest writers happen to do their greatest writing in some of the greatest spots of our U.S. ocean. All of those regions home to now national marine sanctuaries. That's not a coincidence. And to now have a freshwater connection to Ernest Hemingway, well, that's something that I was happy to learn a few minutes ago. So now it's a great honor to invite the next panel up to take their seats. And I'd like to begin by introducing, coming up, and I'd like to begin by introducing the moderator, Dr. Mark Schaefer. Dr. Schaefer is NOAA's Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Conservation and Management, the number 2 at NOAA. And NOAA really is very fortunate to have Dr. Schaefer, who has done quite a tour of duty through the federal family at OSTP within the White House, at the Department of the Interior and USGS in particular, a very long career outside of the federal government. His full bio I encourage you all to read in the program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jason. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you all for being here this morning. I also want to acknowledge the work of Congresswoman Capps and Congressman Benishek. Representative Capps has been a big supporter of NOAA's education programs. She's been behind an initiative to build bipartisan support in the Ports and Oceans Caucus. And she, of course, is co-chair of the National Marine Sanctuaries Caucus. And Dr. Benishek, of course, bipartisan work, is co-chair, again, of the National Marine Sanctuary Caucus, as well as the Invasive Species Caucus, and for his support of NOAA's sanctuaries, especially Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Thank you to you, Jason, and to Shannon, and to colleagues at the Foundation for dependably providing us with a venue and an inspiring program year after year focused on these important issues. Today we're joined by three outstanding members of the ocean community. Dan LaFoley is Principal Advisor, Marine Science and Conservation for the Global Marine and Polar Program at IUCN, the World Conservation Union. And he is the Marine Vice Chair for the World Commission on Protected Areas. Dan has been an advisor on European and global partnerships and alliances on marine conservation issues, and he currently chairs the International Ocean Acidification Reference Users Group. Lynn Zeitlin-Hale joins us from the Nature Conservancy, where she is Managing Director of the Marine Initiative there. Lynn has more than 30 years of experience pursuing marine and coastal ecosystem conservation throughout the world. And Bill Doros is the West Coast Regional Director for NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, and Bill is responsible for nearly 13,000 square miles of protected areas as marine sanctuaries on the west coast of the United States. So we have a great panel to talk with all of you. We are going to try to find some time to take questions from the audience, whether you're here in person or whether you're joining us online. Please feel free to submit us your thoughts. Yesterday, as has been pointed out, John Podesta talked about how people relate to the coastal and ocean environment. When I was growing up in Southern California, my parents regularly took me to Laguna Beach, and we went to that beach, in fact, the same cove, year after year, and I spent the day body surfing and exploring the tide pools and so on. And I developed a strong attachment to the coastal marine environment. Laguna was my special place, and to this day, it really influences the way I think about the world, and it certainly influenced my career. And I think all of us here have had that kind of experience, and that's really why we call these places special. Millions of people across America and many more across the globe build strong, positive emotional ties to these places, and our experiences influence the way we view the environment more broadly and the way that we live. Special places are important to our well-being, to our communities, our economies, and our ecosystems. And these places are great motivators and focal points for the coastal conservation and restoration we need now more than ever. They're critical to sustaining our fisheries, our food supply. They sustain our economy. They provide us jobs. They help us protect and recover threatened and endangered species. And they provide resiliency. They protect our coasts from storms. So we should be encouraged by the many efforts across the world to conserve and restore these special places. However, despite our efforts, coastal marine habitats are declining in size, health, and productivity, and the rate of decline is actually accelerating. Last year, we discovered through a report we jointly did, NOAA with Fish and Wildlife Service, that we're losing coastal wetlands at the rate of 7 football fields every hour. 5 years ago, we were losing wetlands at the rate of 60,000 acres per year. Now we're losing them at a rate of 80,000 acres a year. So I want to underscore not only are things declining, but the rate of decline is accelerating. And wetlands are not the only example. We've lost 20% of the original area of the world's coral reefs. 15% are seriously threatened, and expected losses over the next 10 to 20 years are significant. We expect about 20% are under threat of loss in the next 2 to 4 decades. So we're far from the goal of no net loss on many of our coastal habitat types. One thing we know we need to do is we need to raise the value of coastal marine environments so that economic forces that drive our decisions every day are setting us more on the path of conserving these places as opposed to losing them. And we've got a lot of smart people out there working on this subject of ecosystem service valuation and so on, and I think that's going to help us raise the values. At NOAA, we're working to conserve our coast through many programs. In terms of special places, we have the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. It's a network of 28 reserves in 22 states. Living laboratories to help us find solutions to issues related to climate change and resiliency, habitat protection. And also, over the past 40 years, NOAA has worked to protect special places by designating, as most of you know, 13 marine sanctuaries and 1 marine national monument encompassing more than 170,000 square miles. So these sanctuaries are all about preserving scenic beauty and biodiversity, our cultural heritage, and our economic productivity. So yesterday, John Podesta announced that NOAA is reestablishing a process through which the public can nominate nationally significant marine and Great Lakes areas as potential new marine sanctuaries. I agree with others that I suspect we will be receiving a number of proposals. So this morning, our panel is going to talk about special places and why it is important to identify and protect them, and perhaps most importantly, to enjoy them. And so we're going to begin with brief 4 to 5 minute presentations by each of our panelists. Then I'll ask a question perhaps, and then we'll try to quickly turn to your questions. So with that, let me turn it over to Dan.
Thank you very much indeed, and it's a real pleasure to be here, and you can probably tell from my snappily titled job titles that I'm not from around here. I have very much a kind of international perspective to bring to this, and I just wanted to start by just saying a few words about the kind of theme, communities shaping special places. And we've heard in the film just now about the importance of the responsibility people can take, and people have talked about how important this is. But to me, this is actually, when you look globally, about the difference, about making a difference. And it's probably one of the key core differences that can be made between the challenge that we have around the world of what we call paper parks. These are places where the ocean heartbeat of the community isn't within the protected area. They're names on paper, but they don't happen in real life. And what we really need to do. In your introduction, you've talked about the challenges and pressures on the ocean. And it is through working with communities to get effectively set up areas that really work from any perspective, that we're going to be able to do something about turning the tide, turning the corner with the issues that face our oceans. Now, it may seem that an individual place, even when the community's behind it, isn't enough, but I look on this as shareholders in a greater scheme, and that greater scheme is the global ocean. And it's what we can do together, not just in America, but across countries, that is going to make a real difference. Now, at the moment, we've protected about 2.8% of the global ocean. We have targets internationally, a 10% target by 2020. And 2.8 may not sound much, but it's over 100 million square kilometers around the world. It's 2.8% of 70% of our planet. But we need to do more, and at the heart of it is actually working with communities from all the different perspectives to cherish the values, but also to make sure that these sites matter from whichever perspective you look at them. What can we do to help as IUCN globally? I think there's a number of things we're trying to do, and these are above and beyond the sorts of things you're talking about over these few days. So one of the things we do is we work very closely with Sylvia Earle, who I know many of you know. We're partners in her initiative around hope spots. And for me, a fundamental bit of that is actually giving people a new vocabulary for the blue open ocean that doesn't have names. We want people to talk about the White Shark Cafe. We want them to talk about the Pacific Ocean donut holes and places like that. So that whilst we're focusing on current places we know about and we want to protect, we're starting that procession of other places in the future we should be caring about and getting that in people's minds. So I think that's important. I think it's also important the sort of thing that we're doing in Australia, the World Parks Congress this year. It's only held once every 10 years. There's going to be some amazing marine discussions there. The Office of National Marine Sanctuaries and the Barrier Reef are tremendous partners in helping us make this happen. And for us, that's about providing a forum for everyone around the world trying to work with communities, work with protected areas to share best practice and to say, do you know what, this is the next things we ought to do, the next ambitions we should have, so we can try and write that into international agreements. So for me, it's about that nature connection. It's about the connection with communities, with special places, the importance that has to really make the difference in how we can look after our environment. I think for me, though, that what we need to do is we need to try and step things up further. So we need to be talking about new values, bringing science in a particular way so it can tell us about the carbon values of mangroves, new values people didn't know, and new approaches. How do we connect with new audiences? And so when I think of stepping up globally, I think of the announcement made here yesterday. And that is something tremendous and something which I hope will resonate with other park agencies around the world as a real step forward in how we can engage people and give them a stronger voice in these processes.
Very nice, Dan, and you've proven to everyone why you deserve to have such long titles. Thank you for that global context. That's very nice. All right, Lynn, we'll go to you.
Great. Well, first of all, I have to thank the organizers for bringing Representative Capps here to say such nice things about the Nature Conservancy. But I will definitely get to Morro Bay in there. But, you know, for anyone interested in conservation, and certainly at a place like the Nature Conservancy, place is what matters. And we have often been known as the organization that cares about great places. To me, the conversation, though, that's evolving is, what's a great place? And how do we start thinking about expanding that vision of what's a great place? You know, for many, many years, what made a great place was it had rare species, it had very high biodiversity, it had iconic wildlife. All those things do make a great place. But I think as we look to a future that has 9 billion people on Earth in the not too distant future, where you have a changing climate, which is causing lots of new challenges for many of those people, because of course the coast is where most of those people live, we need to really think about how do we make a bigger tent for a larger number of great places that really are going to support and be valued by the people who live near them. So one of the topics that, but often in those discussions about, you know, the wonky term, ecosystem service. You know, I know there's people in this room who are way better communicators and study this stuff. We know ecosystem services is not something that people relate to, but really understanding and being able to talk about in very concrete terms, and then to be able to map. You know, maps are our friends. You know, as we talk about great places, we often talk about maps about very specific values of nature. So imagine, if you can, that we could point to a particular reef or a particular estuary or a particular sanctuary, just as Representative Capps did about Channel Islands, and say, this square mile of reef sequesters this much carbon or produces this much fish. We just were part of a study in Australia where we could take a really very specific piece of seagrass and say a square mile of seagrass produced $80,000 worth of more fish for the commercial fishermen who benefited from those. So we know, again, the general values of mangroves, of coral reefs for reducing risk to people for for reducing flooding risks or wetlands. But the need to make that very place specific is something that we're really committed to, as are many partners and people in this room, to take that power of place and link those values that people really depend on to those places. So we can build a bigger tent that includes all the people who love and value nature for its specialness, but also bring into that tent people who really are asking the question, how does that benefit me? Tell me exactly why I should preserve or, in many cases, restore that value that we need. So just a thing that we're starting to work on, again, with a whole cast of of partners, excuse me, many of whom are characters, but to really map the ocean's wealth, if you will, so we can talk about that in tangible terms and have that feed the kind of processes that Dan and Mark have been talking about. And by doing that, hopefully changing the paradigm or expanding the paradigm a little bit from really needing to sustain and protect nature, both for its own sake, but really very specifically for those 9 billion people who will be on Earth soon and need the ocean for their well-being. So I have 1 minute left, and I just have to say something about Morro Bay. So to me, it's a wonderful example of making that big tent, of bringing fishermen who often haven't been the biggest supporters for marine protection into a partnership with the sanctuary, with environmental groups, and with themselves to both protect the habitat that produces fish and change their fishing practices to make them sustainable and higher value for them. And I'm happy to talk to anyone more about it afterwards, so thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for underscoring the power of place. And just as Jason said, we had some of America's best writers zeroing in on places, and it turns out they're places that we've ultimately decided to protect. So Bill, before you go, I want to acknowledge Bill's boss, Dan Basta, the architect of the Marine Sanctuaries program. He's right down here. So thank you, Dan.
All right, thanks, Mark, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in this panel. It seems that maybe one of the main currents of this whole conference has been this notion of place, and I want to dive into it just briefly about why is it that we seem to be so energized by place? Why does place matter? And I'll bet for almost everyone here, maybe everyone in this room, like me, your first memory of a place was your first backyard, right? Where the sandbox was, maybe you had a swing set, maybe you had a place that you played with your dog. And as time went on, maybe that sense of place expands to your neighborhood, in terms of a fond memory that you have, where your friends lived in your neighborhood, where the haunted house was that you avoided during Halloween. And your hometown maybe comes next after that. And even as Mark alluded to earlier, the beach, the favorite beach you went to for a vacation, those are powerful memories to all of us. We're very much attracted to those things, those places, and they're scalable through time and through space, right? They expand with time as we grow up, as our horizons grow, they expand in terms of space. And to a large degree, the ultimate objective, and certainly we have it in the Sanctuary program, is that people care about a place that's far from home. Maybe it isn't their backyard. And that people care about a place far into the future. Because we very much get caught up in what matters today and what's important tomorrow. But this ultimate goal, I think, for all of us in the Sanctuary program and for others that deal with place-based management is that we want people to care well into the future about why something matters. So then the second thing I wanted to comment on is this notion of how communities help shape those special places and give you some insights from what we've learned in the Sanctuary program. And I think part of our overall philosophy is that there's, in some ways, very little that we create. There's a tremendous amount that we unleash in terms of what's in communities and what their interests are because they care about places. And the first, and Congresswoman Capps touched on this notion that you need to involve people in decisions. Those may be the decisions, now we're talking about what area to nominate for a new site. But when a sanctuary is there, those are decisions about, do you want to invest your time to serve on the Sanctuary Advisory Council? Do you want to represent other fishermen by being on this panel that meets every month or two? Are you willing to participate in a working group that seeks to get public involvement on what we should do about motorized personal watercraft, about jet skis, and where they should operate, and are they a problem or are they not a problem? And so involving people in identifying the problems is an essential part of what's been our success. We get credited for our management plan review processes being very inclusive. When we revise a management plan for a site, we also get criticized that they take too long. And you can't have both. You can't involve the public and expect something to happen very quickly. A lot of the time delays to some that think it ought to have been done quicker, has been because we've involved the public, and you might think you've got an issue worked out only to find out that not everyone's on board. And so the choice to go forward without everyone's support or backing up and working the issue a little bit harder has been essential to our success. And so the other thing that's been important is to involve people, communities, and sub-parts of the community in place-based educational learning. It's amazing what a $2,000 grant to a school will do to get them motivated to not just start doing a little bit more about beach cleanups, but to involve the entire school in watershed awareness, watershed cleanup, and watershed management. And we've seen tremendous success by working those opportunities because while people do care about their backyard, they care about their children and the future for their children and how those learning opportunities matter. And so to a large extent, this model, we view it as being a very successful model. We're working on three boundary expansions around the program right now, around the country. We completed American Samoa a year and a half ago. There's 2 in Northern California, Cordell Bank and Gulf of the Farallones, and Thunder Bay in Michigan. These are enormous expansions that come from communities saying, I want some of that, I want more of that, I want that in my backyard as well, because of that sense of community involvement. And then, of course, this very exciting opportunity regarding new designations and, new nominations from communities. That's really going to change the discussion along the coast. And Dan's alluding to something I don't think we necessarily anticipated, but it may change the dynamic of the conversation around the globe about what are those special places, why do they matter, how much protection, what form should that protection take, and maybe what are the places we don't need to protect. It's not necessarily the tool that suits every stretch of coast, but we're excited about the opportunity to have that dialogue.
Thanks very much, Bill. Let me ask the panel. You all have talked about special places in different contexts, globally, nationally, et cetera. Is there a special place that stands out in your mind as an example of where we've been particularly successful from the conservation standpoint or the recreation standpoint, et cetera? And is there one thing that stands out that is behind that success that comes to mind? Dan, you want to try?
It would be very easy for me to sit here and go, there's this tremendous place where biodiversity recovered and it did those sorts of things. I want to choose a very different example. I want to take you to a place which is 120 kilometers north of Auckland that quite a lot of you probably haven't heard of. It's called a place called Whangarei. And what I think is tremendous about that in terms of something happening and working is that they ended up with a special place which was protected. In New Zealand, they have a process where, just as you now have in your nomination process, communities can propose areas and it's then taken through by the government to a formal process. What's special about that place is it was the school kids. It was the 7th grade geography school kids over 16 years who worked out how to do it, and they got their special place protected. And I think if you're thinking about where's it gone right, special examples, I think actually realizing that you can give the power to the younger generation in these processes is something which is really truly inspiring. It did take a long time. It took 16 years to do, but that was, part of what happened. But at the end of the day, it really is a special place, that one.
It's a great example. Lynn?
So I'm going to use not a U.S. example because I don't dare pick a special special place. I want to use the example of Palau and Micronesia, which has an association with the U.S. But their entire economy depends on the sea, whether it's for fish or for tourism, and they have changed. Conservation has always been essential in Palau, but how they've done it has changed to make it ever more effective and far-reaching. So they have traditional management that has closures, which of course have been supported by the communities. They then took Western law and made a protected area network system that was supported by national legislation. They realized that paper parks without funding doesn't do you any good, so they instituted a green fee to really collect money and have it go back to support those parks so they could actually be what they're supposed to be. And then because no special place is an island to itself, they thought about a network, and then and the president of Palau challenged his colleagues in the other Micronesian nations to together create a regional approach to marine protection, which again, they are making great progress on in all the Micronesian nations, and thinking about protection, people participation, and sustainable finance all at the same time. And I think that's really important for success.
Great example.
Yeah, I will give a U.S. example, perhaps not surprisingly. Across the sanctuary system, there's 14 successes, but some are even more successful and more unambiguously successful. And the one I'd pick is Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which, like several...
Director of the Pacific Program.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm being magnanimous, right? Although I did grow up in Michigan, let the record show.
Oh, okay.
I root for the Tigers to this day. But Thunder Bay is an area that, as was alluded to last night for those that were at the dinner when Senator Levin spoke, there was an awful lot of support for having a sanctuary for a while, and then it started to erode. And then there was outright opposition. And you could go to Alpena today, and you'd spend a lot of time walking the streets to find someone who actually was one of those opponents. But they were ready to, send NOAA packing. The governor had a very hard time getting to yes. And it's been successful because of persistence in the community, of showing relevance. They've got a visitor center that's considered the Great Lakes Maritime Center that's now, frankly, a community center where people go there and have events that they want to have. The sanctuary is viewed as the marketing key to that part of the northern part of the Lower Peninsula where there's not much going on economically, yet this sanctuary motivates people to come to this region. And most importantly, it's helped to preserve the shipwrecks. So it's been successful in that regard, too, that without this, there wouldn't be that sense of ownership that we need to help protect these shipwrecks well into the future. They also are part of our future, even though they represent our past. So it's been a phenomenal success. When you go to that region, we pointed out there's other places that have been like that. Opposition turned into adamant support. But that's probably the one that shows it the most unambiguously.
Yeah, I think you've really connected people and their cultural and historical values with place, and it resonated. And it's an amazing story, actually. I've heard it in different forms from different people. It's a great example. One of the questions that we got has to do with communications and how important they are to put the spotlight on these places. But at times, whether you're in the federal government or you're in the private sector, the funding to support communications and marketing activities is sometimes left as a lower priority. And I'm wondering if any of you could help answer this question perhaps in the context of an example where your organization has tried to find a way to make sure that you're finding some resources to focus on communications. Before we turn to that, I just wanted to let everybody know that they are allowing us 5 minutes of additional time. So we have 10 minutes to go, and the door's been locked, so you can't sneak out. So, okay, go.
So I'll be quick then in light of that. The National Marine Sanctuaries Act includes a requirement that we do education and outreach. And there's many levels that takes place, it takes the form for us, whether it's standard outreach products, printed material that's becoming less common, the internet, the website, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, videos that we use. It's the tool that people communicate with these days, and through that requirement that we do education and outreach, that we've been very effective, in my estimation, at how you let people know what's going on, what matters, especially in this notion of involving them in problem solving.
Any other thoughts, Lynn?
Sure, just to briefly add to that, I think we also, in addition to these special places, TNC has had a large series of reserves across the U.S. and engagement, education through all those tools that you just mentioned are critical. As soon as if you lose support, communication is key to maintaining the support, and so having it not be highlighted in a kind of overall management plan puts you on a negative cycle. You lose support, you lose funding. So I think maintaining and communicating internally about that essential link is key to resources.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Dan?
So absolutely critical issue. One of the things that we're looking at globally is how we can help agencies across the world share best practice in this. So I think it's critically needed. Resources are tight, and there is an issue about reinventing wheels. There's some tremendous stuff out there. Not just here, I'm not saying that because I'm on the stage. There's some amazing things going off in terms of communication, but you look around other agencies around the world, what they're doing, and I think we can all learn from one another. So one of the things we're trying to do, and we'll be launching some new products on this in the coming year, is to try and showcase some of the best practices around this to perhaps help those who are just starting out see what the others have been doing.
One of the questions we got was, our special places are under being impacted by a variety of stressors. Some of them are global in nature, and the place that is being impacted is not in a position to influence, for example, global CO2 emissions. And so the question becomes, how, if we're talking to somebody from Palau or elsewhere and they're concerned about these things, how do we help them deal with these broad global forces, given that they are living in a very special place that we all value? How do we help them out?
I'm happy to start with that one. I think it's been a real clarion call to people in places where you've done things, quote, right locally, and then these big forces come up. But I do think we're learning a lot from science and from practice about, first of all, if you really do something about local stressors, you're probably going to make your place more resilient. So it shouldn't be a result that you throw your hands up. It's really a call to redouble your efforts on, first of all, those local stressors that you can control to increase resilience. I think the other thing, it's a call to go to scale, to do some of the things that Dan was talking about, of networks, of replication. And then I do think it's also a opportunity, if you will, to link local and global issues, that just like we need people to be doing very local things, we need those same voices to be heard and to be calling for action at the larger scales.
I'll just quickly add, and I'm not even going to tackle global climate change, that for an
You
MPA.
got 2
no,
minutes.
I don't, yeah.
I think I ought to be able to.
Okay, so No, but I'm in concurrence that it's about networks, right? And we think of the National Marine Sanctuary System. And you'll see when these criteria come out on Friday for the new nominations, that's one of the things we're asking people to identify is how does your nomination connect with other marine sanctuaries or other protected places from a connectivity standpoint where you can get at some of these different stressors being separate from where you're seeing the impact, and how do you complement the system of the National Marine Sanctuary system? So that's going to be a focal point for us.
One of our biggest challenges, I would say. I have a fairly specific question, and I'm going to broaden it a little bit. But the specific question is how do local scuba clubs, this is getting into something very practical, but I think it's significant. How do local scuba clubs get more involved in promoting special places? But I think to broaden it a little bit, there are a lot of recreational groups out there that their business thrives along with the success of a special place. And how can we engage them? I mean, here's a situation where they're asking us, how can we get involved in promoting these places in a bigger way?
Yeah, I mean, I can just give you some thoughts at a kind of broader scale. I think it is by forging partnerships, understanding the perspectives they come from, and bringing the science in a particular way. So in the UK, we've had a scheme working with the diving community for key species which are signatures of climate change, for example, and getting a much better understanding of what's happening around the coast. I think one of the challenges is how we then properly integrate that information back into decision making, and I'm not sure we're still there yet, but I think there'll be examples from elsewhere, and I think this is what I was talking about earlier in terms of being innovative and actually kind of scaling up. We do need to do this because we are going to need many more eyes and ears out on the water because we are going into a period of unprecedented change, I think we can clearly say, from these multiple stresses in terms of what's happening. What we don't want to do is not have enough people out there knowing what to look for and then get caught. Mm-hmm. And we've already been caught by some of these multiple stresses, and we should learn the lesson from that and build much bigger, better networks.
Just to quickly add to that, because there are some fantastic examples in the U.S. I mean, throughout Florida and some of the U.S. territories in the Caribbean where there's a lot of coral nurseries being developed and expanded, actually with support from NOAA and others. Volunteer divers are they're doing the work that's enabling that work to go to scale. Again, another tropical example, Reef Check is all divers looking at coral reefs around the world. I think we need to be a little bit more creative in some of our cooler water places about using that community. But I do think in some of the sanctuaries and other places and other projects have been really good at engaging them. I think how we kind of amplify their engagement into really other activities that enhance overall stewardship and sort of support for these is work we could all kind of benefit from thinking more about.
Yeah, the one thing I would add that just within the perspective of the sanctuary system is, in some ways, just ask. You know, each of the sites has a superintendent, has an education coordinator, has volunteer coordinators, and they all have extensive volunteer networks. And so in some places we do use divers specifically, but as we saw last night, again at the dinner, volunteerism is a huge aspect of how we function and operate. And if someone's got an idea for a project, go to that local site and say, here I am, here's what I've got to offer, how can we help? And we've involved divers a lot using that specifically even for cleanups, right? Not just for the data collection, but for harbor cleanups or marine debris removal, and it's been really engaging to them because divers are looking for something special to do.
Yeah.
One thing I think ultimately what we have to focus our attention on is raising awareness beyond the degree that we have had people's attention today, kind of reaching out, scaling it up to another order of magnitude in terms of people's not just awareness, but enjoyment of these special places. And we want people to get out there. We want them to visit them. If they can't visit them, we want them to know that they exist, and that means something for all of us, even if we can't get to these places. Yeah. Thank you to all of you thank you to the panel in particular for your outstanding, thoughtful ideas. Thank you to the audience for hanging in there with us, and I will turn it back over to our Master of Ceremonies. Please.
So taking a page out of TV interviews and late night Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, if you guys watch, what we do is use the live discussions as a teaser for what really goes on the web these days. So for those of you who want to pay attention, Capitol Hill Ocean Talk, Oceans Live, will be now interviewing Dan and Mark to continue the discussion on special places. Oceans Live will be broadcast during the lunch. So as you grab your lunch, if you're interested, pay attention to the monitors. I also want to commend Bill, because whenever I'm asked what my favorite sanctuary is, I'm never courageous enough to draw the ire of any one of 13 superintendents who may not agree with my decision. I usually say it's like trying to choose between 14 or among 14 of my children, all unique, all different, all special. So Bill, I don't envy what the response you'll get, but I appreciate your courage. With that, we're going to use the yellow tickets for lunch, and as yesterday, go into the center of the room. There'll be 2 lines. The lunch is on either side. Left and right will be the same. So go down, have your choice, and we'll see you back here at 1:15 for a special keynote with Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell. Thank you.